So we're going to read John from chapter 7, start with verse 10 to 20. However, after his brothers had left for the festival, he went also, not publicly, but in secret. Now at the festival, the Jewish leaders were watching for Jesus and asking, "Where is he?" Among the crowds there was widespread whispering about him. Some said, "He is a good man." Others replied, "No, he deceives the people." But no one would say anything publicly about him for fear of the leaders. Not until halfway through the festival did Jesus go to the temple courts and begin to teach. The Jews there were amazed and asked, "How did this man get such learning without having been taught?" Jesus answered, "My teaching is not my own. It comes from the one who sent me. Anyone who chooses to do the will of God will find out whether my teaching comes from God or whether I speak on my own. Whoever speaks on their own does so to gain personal glory, but he who seeks the glory of the one who sent him is a man of truth. There is nothing false about him. Has not Moses given you the law? Yet not one of you keeps the law. Why are you trying to kill me?" "You are a demon-possessed," the crowd answered. "Who is trying to kill you?" And then we skip forward to verse 40 to 46. On hearing his words, some of the people said, "Surely this man is the prophet." Others said, "He is the Messiah." Still others asked, "How can the Messiah come from Galilee? Does not Scripture say that the Messiah will come from David's descendants and from Bethlehem, the town where David lived?" Thus the people were divided because of Jesus. Some wanted to seize him, but no one laid a hand on him. Finally, the temple guards went back to the chief priests and the Pharisees, who asked them, "Why didn't you bring him in?" "No one ever spoke the way this man does," the guards replied.
Please do open up James chapter 7 on your lap. And as you do so, can I give you another question? It's not part of a quiz. Here's the question. How would you define a bad day? Okay. What would make a bad day for you? Just have that in your mind. Maybe you're Irish and you already had a bad day last night. Sorry, Aileen. Here's perhaps a bad day. You go to the coffee machine, the coffee caddy is empty. You realise there's some homework that needs to be done, and it's 8:30. You recognise that you should have charged up your electric vehicle because the range is not sufficient. There's no school uniform for you to wear. You've missed the train, or it's a train strike, and you didn't read your emails. You've got difficult meetings from 0800 hours to about 6 o'clock at night. You're visiting the dentist. Guaranteed to be a bad day. A few weeks ago, I had none of those, but I had a really, really bad day. Let me explain. I was on a website filling out some information to enable people to find us more easily. And after doing some data entry, then comes the tricky part that looks like this. You need to prove your identity and the fact that you're not a robot. Now, the older I get, the more difficult I find these. And so you have to click on the images of motorbikes or bridges or bicycles. So I clicked on a few. I just close my eyes and just do random, just for the sheer fun of it. But something happened and my day was getting worse, because then this screen popped up. Could not verify you were human. So my day was getting worse. Thankfully, beneath that sentence, which was a lot clearer on my monitor than on the screen, it says, "If you need help, then please call." Now, I've taken the phone number out, lest you want to have some mirth at my expense and ring them up and congratulate them on identifying me as non-human. But I rang them up, I got the help I needed, and my day took an uptick when they realized I was, in fact, a human who's incompetent on computers. I had a problem with my identity. John 7 to John 9, those chapters are all about identity. Who is Jesus? We looked at John 7 last week. We began and we saw in verse 1, Jesus has a number on his head. There are people that want him dead. The setting, verse 2, is it's the Jewish Feast of Tabernacles. It's autumn. And Jesus shows us that he's not a Feast of Tabernacle person. He's a Passover person. So there's a search going on for Jesus. He's doing his best to avoid being captured by other people's agenda for his life and for his diary. But as we continue in the chapter, notice 5 different sentences that people are trying to define to identify who Jesus is. Verse 12, he's a good man. Verse 12 again, he's a deceiver of the people. Down to verse 20, he's demon-possessed. Verse 40, he's a prophet. Verse 41, he's the Christ. There's no question on anybody's part in John's gospel that Jesus is claiming to be God because of the miracles. But there is a problem when it comes to who is he to say those things. There are signs recorded by John, and if everyone was recorded at the end of John's gospel, we learn this. There's not enough books. Google hasn't got enough capacity to record everything that Jesus did. But his enemies and his friends agreed that Jesus has performed miracles. He has some power. He has some game. He has some authority. How does he teach like this without going to graduate school? But who is he to say these things? That's the problem of the Christ. That's the problem of the Messiah. That's the problem of Jesus. Who is he to say these things, to make these claims? Now, if you Googled this, who are the 5, who are the 3, who's the most influential person in all of human history, Jesus makes the top 5, the top 3, and arguably, he is the most influential person of all human history. And so no thoughtful person cannot take this question very, very seriously. Who is Jesus? And here's the problem we're wrestling with. Here are 4. I've just condensed it a little bit. He's either a good man, he's either a deceiver, he's either demon-possessed, i.e. a lunatic, or he is the Christ. And as we look through those 4 things this morning, I think 1 is absolutely impossible. 2 are improbable. 1, I believe, is inescapable. And so we're going to walk our way through those 4 claims. Here's the first one that I believe is impossible. The impossible option. Christ, Jesus, he's a good man. He's a good man. Now, because of time, I've put 2 things together here. Look at verse 12 again. People say Jesus, they try to work through the problem of who Jesus is. Here's option 1. Jesus is a good man. And that's in verse 12, and I put verse 12 together with verse 40. He is a prophet. He's a good teacher. Essentially, it's the same thing. He's a great moral teacher, a great prophet. Now, other people have said what Jesus has said in history, and they've been classified as evil or a fool. But no one made statements like this. Jesus claimed to be Christ through dramatic statements. Here are a few. What do I mean? The next chapter, chapter 8, towards the end of the chapter 8, Jesus makes this phenomenal statement. In chapter 8, verse 58, he says, "Before Abraham was, I am." And the very next sentence, people pick up rocks and they want to stone him to death, because they realize that Jesus claims to be I am. He takes upon himself the name of God, which is from the Old Testament, Exodus chapter 3. And Jesus says, before Abraham was your patriarch, your father, the founder of the Jewish nation, I was even before him. And I'm not just before Abraham, I am equal to God. I'm fully human, says Jesus, but I'm also equal, I'm fully divine. And he takes upon himself the name of Yahweh, the covenant-making, covenant-keeping God of the Jewish people, of Israel. He's saying the same thing he said in chapter 6 that we looked at last month, when Jesus says, I am. Do not be afraid with these huge waves, this storm that the disciples are facing on the lake of Galilee, on the Sea of Galilee. He's saying, do not be afraid. Why should we not be afraid? I am is with you. The one who spoke the wind and the waves into being, the one who was there at the very origin of all human history, I am. I have beginningless. I am the source of uncreated life. Before the world was made, I was there, and I will be there throughout all of eternity. And when they heard Jesus' claims, they picked up rocks because they knew what he was claiming. Jesus Christ is more than a good man. Later on in John's Gospel, we're going to read these words. It's during the trial setting. A kangaroo court is set up to listen to and make a judgment over the claims of Jesus. And Jesus is asked the question by the high priest, are you the Christ? Are you the Messiah? And Jesus says, it is as you have said. At the end of history, I'm going to appear, and there will be a seat of judgment, and I will judge over all mankind. He's constantly making massive statements, Jesus, about his nature and about his identity. And if you read the Gospels, one conclusion that you cannot come to is that Jesus is just, he's only a good man. That's impossible. His claims are far too great. Then he makes radical positions on different topics. What do I mean? There's one time in the Gospel where Jesus is looking out over Jerusalem. And he sits there and he tells them the parable, his disciples, the parable of the tenants. And he says this amazing statement. He takes this radical position over history. Jesus says, I keep sending you prophets. I keep sending you wise men. And you keep on killing them. And no one raises an eyebrow. Jesus says, I'm the source of the prophets. I'm the source of all of human history. And I'm the source of everyone that's come to point to me. And Jesus says these words, and the people that are listening just say, oh. No one says, how can you say that? No one raises an eyebrow. He just makes this offhanded compliment, or comment rather, and people just say, oh. Throughout the Gospels, Jesus continually forgives people of their sins, and people are astonished at his claims. But do you know why they're astonished? Well, look, on the screen here, you've got a picture of a kite. You've got a picture of a kite. Imagine I give one of my sons a kite from the back of the car in the boot where it lives, and they go out and play, and one of their mates breaks it. And they bring it back to me, and they say sorry to me because, sorry that we've broken your kite. They don't say sorry to Sam or to Harry, they say sorry to me. Now that would be completely appropriate because I'm the one who bought it, I'm the one who owns it, and so it's right that they come and apologize not to Harry or to Sam but to me because I'm the one who will have to pay the cost to get another one, to get a new one. When Jesus Christ walks over to someone who's committed adultery, to a man or to a woman in the Gospels, Jesus says these words, I forgive you for that adultery. In other words, Jesus says you've sinned not against your husband or against your wife alone. Your sin is against me. Every sin is primarily against me because Jesus says that he is God. He's constantly, routinely making incredible claims throughout the Gospels. And then he says something like this, I'm the source of ultimate reality. Where does he say that? In these famous words in John's Gospel, I am the way, I'm the truth, and I'm the life. I'm the way and I'm the only way. I'm the truth and I'm the only truth. And in me is life eternal. I'm the source of ultimate reality. Now, for those reasons and many more, saying that Jesus Christ, verse 12, verse 40, is a good man alone is just off the table because his claims are too great. Jesus Christ did not leave you with that option. Here's the second one, number two, the two improbable options. You had an impossible one, that Jesus is good. And now here are two improbable options, that Jesus is a deceiver or Jesus is insane. Verse 12, the second half of verse 12, people say, he deceives people, he deceives the people. And then down in verse 20, you are demon-possessed. Now, both of these statements, these identifiers that people make of Jesus, both of them are to do with fooling people. In one of them, you fool yourself if you're self-deluded, if you're deranged. And the other one is about fooling other people. That's in verse 12 and verse 20. In either case, the theory is that Jesus willingly somehow colluded to deceive other people that he was divine. And there's a problem with this improbable claim. Does the theory match with what we know of the life of Jesus? Does the theory match with what we know of the life of Jesus? Look at verse 45 towards the end of the passage. Verse 45. The guards come back. The chief priests and the Pharisees say, and there was finger pointing, "Why didn't you arrest him? We've been after him since verse 1 and verse 2. You know that he's a fool. You know that he's a deceiver." And what do the guards say? He's a crackpot. He's got the intelligence of a poached egg, like C.S. Lewis said. No, they said, verse 46, never was there a person, a man, who spoke the way that Jesus does. There's something in what he's saying. There's an authenticity to the words and person of Jesus Christ. They don't say he's a lunatic. They don't say he's a deceiver. I mean, look at the teachings of Jesus Christ. There's a man called G.K. Chesterton. He was a great thinker of a bygone era. He said, just imagine you found a key lying around at home. That may be too close to the bone. Maybe lots of people say, I'm always looking for keys and tapping pockets like me. But imagine you found a key on your kitchen surface. And then what would you do? You'd start trying which lock it fitted into, wouldn't you? I mean, it needs a home. That's the one it fits, and it fits perfectly, and the mechanism is engaged, and the barrel turns as I insert the key. Now, then you have two options. Was that just a chance happening that the key was found? And it just so happened that the key that was found fits into a lock in your home. Perhaps someone from a different home left the key, but it also fits into one of yours. And that brings up some other questions. But a rational response would be, if I found a key at home and it fits into one of my locks at home, then that key was made by a locksmith for that lock. Now that would be completely rational. Here is Jesus Christ, who was born and raised and taught in a pre-modern society thousands of years ago. The claims of his teaching in Matthew chapter 5 to Matthew chapter 7 alone, which is called the Sermon on the Mount, has satisfied huge minds and needy hearts throughout every culture and every millennia since he spoke them. The greatest and ablest minds have found the teachings of Jesus true, satisfying, and fulfilling. Every century, every culture, Christianity has taken root in new countries as the gospel's gone out through the lips of missionaries. In every area, Christianity has affected, for good, ultimately, different parts of our culture. It's given birth to works of music and art and charity. If Jesus' teachings have had that influence throughout the ages to match as it were, the lock of the human heart with the key of his teaching, that means he can't be a fool and he is not a deceiver. Doesn't it seem to make more sense, according to Chesterton and the gospel, that actually the teaching of Jesus makes sense with the needs of our hearts and the longings of our lives because of who he is? He's the lock maker. That's just his teaching. Look at his life, the life of Jesus. Lots of people throughout the ages have claimed to be perfect, haven't they? And then people have got to know them, and it's been very quickly dispelled. Lots of people have claimed to be divine and have not gotten away with it. The closer you get to them, the more easily their claims are dismissed. They've been evil, they've been foolish, they've been deceivers, but not Jesus. When people got close to Jesus, they were utterly and completely convinced Jesus was who he claimed to be. He lived a life of complete, absolute, personal, moral clarity and beauty. There's a tenderness to Jesus without any weakness. There's a strength to Jesus without harshness. There's a humility to Jesus without any lack of confidence. There's a holiness to Jesus without a lack of approachability. There's a tremendous courage to Jesus, and yet he was always tender to those in need. That's the Jesus of the Gospels. P.T. Forsyth was a Scottish minister and Christian thinker, a theologian from a different era. He says this: if you read about Jesus in the Bible and you say, that's not God, then the God you know of is less than the God I crave and the world needs. Jesus' disciples followed him around, listening to his teachings, looking at his life, and pretty often they said these words: who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him. Who is this guy? He's a good man. It's impossible. Here's the last one. The inescapable option. Jesus is the Christ. Jesus is the Messiah, the long-awaited King. Now, the way that your heart works, my heart works, the human heart works, is this. It's not enough to say, just show me the right evidence, and then I'll change. Here's my proof. Smoking. We know that smoking's bad for us. We know that vaping is no good for us. And yet, it's still £1 billion industry. Fast food. McDonald's is not food. And yet still we go and still we buy a McFlurry, or they're not chips, they're fries. There's no meat there is some meat in the burgers. But do you know what I mean? It's not proper food. It's not good for us. It will supersize us if that's all we enjoy and eat. So we cannot just say, show me the evidence. That's not how the human heart works. You have to let the truth of an argument or a person address you. You have to let it go to work on you like salt in a steak. You have to let the truth argue with you. You have to let the truth deal with you personally. Jesus says he is the Christ, and there's no other way to account for his life and his claims other than Jesus is who he claimed to be. It's an inescapable option. And here are some implications of that. Number one, if Jesus is the Christ, that's an all or nothing proposition. If Jesus is who he says he is, then either we have all of him or we have none of him. It's binary. It's black and white. It's clear. But that's not where many of us are. If I knocked on your door to come into your home and you said to me, come in, Nigel, stay out, Stokes, I would be in a dilemma because I can't do that. I can't come in part of me, but not all of me. I'd be confused. I probably think that you need some more sleep. But you can't have Nigel without Stokes because it's my name. It's who I am. You can't have one but not the other. But we do just the same with Jesus. What do I mean? Some of us say to Jesus, come in, teacher, stay out, king. I believe what you teach, but I don't want you to rule or own my life. Come in, helper. I need your resources. I need comfort. Stay out, God. Your claims are too great. I want to live my own life. Some of us say, come in, Jesus. Stay out, Christ. And he cannot do that. You either have all of him or you have none of him. Verse 43. They were divided over Jesus. Now that's inevitable because Jesus is an all or nothing proposition. Do we follow him or do we not? When Jesus was born, we sung our first Christmas carol. But each Christmas we look at the Christmas passages from Matthew and from Luke. And when Jesus was born in Luke chapter 2, verse 34, there's a claim, there's a prophecy from Simeon as he holds a baby, Jesus, in his arms. And he says, this child is set for the fall and rising again of many in Israel. In other words, it's all or nothing. It's fall or rising. There's nothing in between. The Bible says that Jesus is a block of stone. You either build your whole house, your whole life on him, or you build it on something that won't bear the weight that we put upon it, like sand, and your house will fall. You stub your toe on a stone, who is Jesus. There's no way around it. Jesus demands everything. Total reorientation of your life. All in, absolute obedience. Complete, unconditional, undiluted loyalty and allegiance. There's nothing else that he demands or deserves. And here's the test. Are we scouring the Bible as we listen to it? Big chunks, medium-sized chunks, small chunks. Are we scouring the Bible every day to find out what God's will is for our lives? Is that part of our DNA? Are we examining our lives and chucking out stuff that we know will harm Christ and displease him, and adding things that he wants into our lives? Is there a stuff out, stuff in approach to our life? Are we taking all our resources, our time, our money, our talents, and putting them all at his feet, at his disposal? When was the last time you had a review? Are we wrestling to push the values of Jesus into every area of our life and every area of our hearts? So nothing's off limits. No weeds growing in our relationship with Jesus. Are we wrestling with Jesus in prayer? Are we doing that? Are we thinking of the minimum, or are we thinking, how much time can I spend with Jesus? Because I want to see his face. And I'm going to invest time. I'm going to turn gadgets off. I'm going to create an atmosphere and a space in my diary and life where I can take hold of Jesus through prayer. I just want to see his face more than anything else. Some of us are playing with Jesus like he's a kitten. And the Bible says he's a lion. It's all or nothing. It's all or nothing. Number 2, here's another implication. He's so glad I came to church this morning. Here's another one. Morality, goodness. This is not enough. It's another implication of Jesus being the Christ, the Messiah, the long-awaited King. Now, there are people who say all religions are the same. And that's really lazy thinking, because you want to say to someone that says that, please have a look with me at the religions of the world. Please have a look more carefully, because every religion does not say the same thing. All roads do not lead to one top of the mountain experience. Every other religion says that morality and goodness are enough, that you can get to God with your own efforts. And Christianity says the very opposite. Other religions say, there is God. He's at the top of the mountain. Jesus says, no, I am God. Other religions say, here's how you reach him. Jesus says, I've already done everything you need to reach God. Other religions say, there is a way to God. Jesus says, I'm the way, I'm the truth, I'm the life. So Christianity shouts at us and says, your own morality, your own do-goodness is not enough. It's insufficient to get you to God. You're not good enough. And it's a burden that's too heavy for us to carry. If God had just sent us a prophet to tell us what to do, then he would have known that we could have got there if we just followed the prophet's teachings. But instead, God the Father, out of his benevolent heart towards us and for his own glory, arranged everything. He sent his son, Jesus Christ, to take our punishment. He died in our place. He did everything that was needed so that all we need to do is to receive what God sent by faith, his son, Jesus Christ, who died in our place. If we receive him by faith, even this morning we can have a living relationship with the God of the whole universe. You can't get to God by climbing up a ladder of effort, of morality, of goodness. And so God has come down, and Jesus died in our place and for the sins of the world. Salvation is by grace alone. So number 1, application, it's all or nothing. Number 2, morality, goodness are not enough. Number 3, to close. As you look at the claims of Jesus, beware of, we each have a bias. We each have a bias. If you're unsure about who Jesus is this morning, it's been a great morning to come as we look at the claims of Jesus Christ. But can I ask you to imagine a really silly scene? Can I ask you to imagine a cow? I don't know what sort of cow this is, but it's a cow. Imagine that there are a couple of flies living on a cow, and they're having a conversation. Okay, I haven't lost my marbles. But that these flies are having a conversation, and they say something like this. What are we to do with this cow? I don't know. What do you make of this cow? What do you feel about this cow? Well, I think the other cow was better. They smelt worse, which is great because we're a fly. What do you think? What do you make? What do you do with this cow? The cow does not care at all what the flies are thinking or saying, because he's of such greatness in comparison to them that they can say what they like and think what they like and behave as they like. But I hope they come to a conclusion what to do with the cow's tail that's about to banish them off. It's ridiculous for flies sitting on a cow to discuss what they think of the cow. How do you like that cow? The other one was better. Friends, some of us think we know what we think about gender, sex, giving, serving, the future, guilt, shame. I know what I believe, and I don't want anyone to challenge me. I understand my desires, I understand my passions. I know that I need to change a little bit. And so I'll look at Jesus as long as he fits into the space that I will give him in my life. He can have some of my life at Christmas, at Easter, but there will be boundaries and there will be a limit. Remember the flies on the cow. It does not matter one iota to God what you think about him. It matters completely what he thinks about you. That's all that matters. Verse 17. If anyone chooses to do God's will, he will find out whether my teaching, says Jesus, comes from God or whether I speak on my own. When the astronomer does an investigation, they get out the telescope. When the biologist goes to her investigation, she takes a microscope. Verse 17, Jesus gives us an instrument to investigate his claims. If you want to find him, here it is, verse 17. Are you willing to do his will? That's the tool of the trade. And like any fair-minded scientist or astronomer, are you aware of your bias? So that when you look at the claims of Jesus, are you willing to go through to the logical conclusion, or have you already made up your mind? You can't say, I'm going to look and see what Jesus says. I'm going to look at his claims. But if he messes up my beliefs, I'm out of here. That means you're not fair-minded and you've not got an awareness of your bias. Jesus says, if you want to find me, here's the instrument, here's the matrix, here's the tools. Verse 17, if anyone chooses to do God's will, he will find out whether my teaching comes from God or whether I speak on my own. Why don't you go to Jesus this morning and say this, Lord, I don't know if you're there, and I don't know if you're caring for me. Lord, I don't know if you're real. Please show yourself to me. And if you do, I will obey you, because God already has in Jesus. Read about him. Talk directly to him in prayer. Lord, I don't even know if you can hear me, but start talking. Start pursuing him. Do you have the courage to do that this morning, perhaps for the first time? Let the truth deal with you. It's all or nothing. Verse 46, no one spoke as he did.